Well, thank you, Maria, and thank you, Mayor Emanuel, and certainly Howard at 1871. I wish this was around when I was starting out in 1994, because the outcome would have probably been a little bit different. So this is a pretty cool place to have. But I got to say, it's great to be home in Chicago, and it's great to be in a room full of entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs. But most importantly, it's great to be in a room full of adults. And I'll explain. My sister Karen, she works for me, and she handles a lot of these events that I do. And a while back, my sister Karen got a call from a young woman who's part of the Delta Gamma sorority house at Purdue University. And my sister has a hard time saying no when people call. And this young woman called up and asked if I would come to Purdue and speak on behalf of the Delta Gamma sorority house. And my sister said I would love to. And I'm not going to lie, I was actually looking forward to it. I thought, I'm going to be the big man on campus. This is going to be a lot of fun. And my buddy John and Ari found out I was going, so they wanted to come. And we've got our suits on. We're about to walk out the door. And as we're walking out the door, there's my wife, Giuliana, and she started laughing. And I said, honey, what is so funny? She said, well, you think you guys are going to go there and you're going to be the big men on campus. But everyone there is going to think you're there for Parents' Weekend. I hate when my wife was right, because lo and behold, I got there, and I'm at the Delta Gamma sorority house meeting some of the folks, and this young woman came running up to me, and she was so excited, and she had this big grin on her face, and she started going on about how she never missed an episode of The Apprentice, and she watched it each week, and I'm kind of smiling, and she went on to tell me she was in the 6th grade when the show was on. I felt really old really fast. But it got me to thinking, that first season of that show, believe it or not, was in 2004. So it was over 11 years ago. And it was a life-changing event for me. It definitely got me an opportunity to see so many different businesses and meet so many great leaders over the last 11, 12 years. And everywhere I go, people will stop me and they'll always ask me the same question. They always say, did you know you were going to win that business competition show when you first started taping? And I'm always very honest with people. I had no idea. I was competing with 15 other contestants. We had people from Harvard and Wharton and Yale and all these fancy business schools. I was just a small business owner from Chicago. But I go on to tell them, if you were to ask my mom, and I can't make this up, my mom claims she knew I was going to win The Apprentice when I was 10 years old. And when I was 10, my mom knew that I was born to be an entrepreneur. And it all began on my parents' wedding anniversary weekend. My mom and dad were going up to Lake Geneva for the weekend to celebrate their wedding anniversary, and they wanted to spend some time alone. So they shipped me off to my grandmother's house. My grandmother lived at 61st and Kaminsky, right by Midway Airport. And I went there, and I woke up Saturday morning, and my grandmother was in the kitchen making breakfast for me. And I was a very inquisitive kid. I would always ask a million questions. What goes here? How does this work? Why are you doing that? So I started inundating my grandmother with all these questions, and she decided to pull me in the kitchen that morning and teach me how to cook. So I spent 7 hours that morning in my grandmother's kitchen mastering the art of making pancakes. I could make you a blueberry pancake, a banana pancake, you name it, I could make it. So I finished that day and I went to bed Saturday night, and I woke up Sunday morning, I popped out of bed, I ran into my grandmother's kitchen, and the first thing I did is I picked up her old rotary telephone, and I called every old lady who lived on my grandmother's block, and I invited them to come over for a pancake breakfast. So it was great. They loved it. I made them pancakes. They were pinching my cheeks. They thought it was the neatest thing they'd ever seen. But when they left, I made a rather interesting discovery. You see, when they left, I started clearing their plates away from the table. And I discovered that each and every one of those ladies left a $5 bill underneath the plate. That's what I said. I said, huh? I'm onto something here. So I did what I thought was perfectly normal. I took the money, I put it in my pocket, and I kept my mouth shut. I didn't say a word to anybody. I didn't want my sisters to get in on the action. So I went back home that week, and Friday afternoon, the school bus dropped me off in front of my parents' house, and I went blazing into my front door, and I demanded that my mom take me to my grandmother's for the weekend. Well, this went on for the next 5 weekends, and my mom couldn't quite understand this new relationship that I'd formed with my grandmother, or I suppose I should say partnership that I'd formed with my grandmother. And then my mom was in my room one afternoon, and I'm downstairs, and I hear this loud yell of my name, and she demanded that I come upstairs, and she sat me down, and she was really frazzled because she had found a stack of $5 bills in my sock drawer, and she demanded to know where a 10-year-old boy was able to come up with hundreds of dollars in cash. And I had to fess up I was running a makeshift restaurant out of my grandmother's house. I think Maria would have put that business to an end. I didn't have a proper license, Maria. But my mom put the business to an end because Maria wasn't there. She claimed I was fleecing these old ladies out of their Social Security checks. Now, when I was 10, obviously I didn't know it, but I possessed a trait back then that is so important in anyone who wants to find success in life. And that trait is having the ability to recognize an opportunity, but more importantly, seizing that opportunity. Opportunities to start a business, opportunities to strengthen your marriage, to increase your faith, opportunities to make your neighborhood a better place. You see, I find that most people go through life and they see opportunity all around them. It's the very few that reach out, grab a hold of it, and do something with it. And for me, that was something that stayed with me my whole life. Now, I started out in corporate America, and I had a very brief period there. I had worked for a company for a brief period of time, and I watched a fellow who'd been there for 30 years get fired. And this guy was the first guy in the office, the last guy to leave, and they fired him for no other reason than greed. And I left the office that day, and I said, I'm never going to let that happen to me. And I left there determined to get back in touch with my entrepreneurial spirit, and I wanted to find a business. So I started networking with everyone that I could, and I called every friend that I had, and I searched and I searched and I searched. And I'll never forget the first business I looked at. My buddy Kyle called me up, and he said, Bill, I've got a friend of a friend who's selling a bar on the west side of Chicago. This guy's relocating. I think he can buy this thing for a great price. Well, I was thrilled. I said, Kyle, set up an appointment for me on Saturday. I'll be there at noon. So he does. And Saturday comes, and I get in my car, and I'm all excited, and I'm driving over to the bar on the west side of Chicago. It was over here by where the Whole Foods is now on North Avenue, and I don't know the street. But back in 04, it wasn't quite what it is today. Actually, I should say 94. Yeah, Kingsbury. Yeah, right over there. And I'm driving over there, and I'm thinking I'm going to be the next Sam Malone from Cheers, right? By the way, those kids at Purdue had no idea who Sam Malone was. I felt old once again. It was like crickets in the room. But as I'm driving over, that's what I'm envisioning. And I get there, and I pull in the front of this place, and as I pull in the front, my heart sinks, because Kyle had only given me the address of this place. He'd never mentioned the name. And I saw the name of the bar right above the door. And the name of the bar was called The Aftermath. Yeah, that's what I was like, oh boy, this isn't Cheers, man. But I opened up the door, and I walked in, and I met the owner of this place. He had this thick Greek accent, and he put his arm around me, and he was the fastest talking salesman I'd ever met. He's telling me how I'm going to be a millionaire if I buy this place, and it's such a moneymaker. And he starts walking me around, and as we start to walk around, I become more alarmed, because it occurs to me that the Aftermath was no ordinary bar. This was a bondage bar. I don't know how they got licensed, Maria. But he's showing me the different torture devices and these contraptions. I'm a young guy right out of college. I'm terrified. I'm like, how am I going to get out of here alive? And I'm quickly thinking, okay, just don't ruffle any feathers. Give him the courtesy of a walkthrough. And I do. And he says, Bill, I'm going to take you into the real moneymaker here. And he brings me into the basement, and he introduces me to what they call the dungeon room. Now, I'm standing in the dungeon room, and I look over at this fella, and I said, sir, I really would like to be involved in a business where my family can help me. And I don't think my 65-year-old mother's going to want to work the dungeon room at 4 in the morning on a Saturday. But I got out of there alive, thank God. And I kept searching and searching, and I was about 6 months into my search. And I was sitting at this outdoor cafe right on Delaware. It was the Third Coast Cafe. And these 3 European guys sat down at the table next to me, and they started smoking these big cigars. And it was like an idea had just come down from the heavens with a bolt of lightning and struck me. And I said, I'm going to start the first ever Cigar of the Month Club. And I would send out 5 cigars to people's homes. I would generate a newsletter to teach them about the cigars. And I thought people may want to give this as a gift, so I'll put a little gift card in the box as well. So I immediately left the cafe, and I went over to my buddy John's apartment. He lived at Division in Lakeshore. See, I'm glad this is a Chicago crowd, because I can refer to these places and you guys know what I'm talking about. And he was just finishing up school, and I pitched him on the idea, and he was on board. So we pooled all of our resources together. We actually got a third silent investor. We came up with $24,000. That was it. We each kicked in $8,000. And we decided to make our world headquarters in my buddy's 400 square foot studio apartment. Right? I mean, it was like double the stage. So I pushed his bed in the corner, and we got some used desks and some used computers for my brother-in-law. He was also an entrepreneur. And then I got 7 1-800 phone lines piped in this little apartment. And we were ready to get this business up and running. And there was one thing I had to do. I had to go in and I had to quit my job at the metals company. And I went in there and I sat down with the 2 owners and I looked these guys right in the eye. And I said, I think I'm going to be pretty successful one day. And I'm going to leave the company and this is what I'm doing. And you know what these guys did? They laughed. They said, a cigar of the month club? That's the most ridiculous idea we've ever heard. It's so ridiculous, we're going to keep your office here because when you run out of money in 6 weeks, we're going to hire you back, but with a 20% pay cut. Yeah, not quite the words of encouragement I was hoping for, but when you're an entrepreneur, you love to prove people wrong. And I left there and I was mad, and I was determined to prove these guys wrong. So I got back in my car and I drove back down to our world headquarters, in my buddy's 400 square foot studio apartment. And I sat down at that used computer I got from my brother-in-law and I typed a letter. And in the letter, I explained how this Cigar of the Month Club worked. At the end of the letter, I asked for help. And I took the letter and I put it inside of an envelope, and I put the envelope inside of a box, because back then I knew a box would always get opened before an envelope. And I put some cigars in there. And then I went to a local costume shop. It was a costume shop on my grandma's house where I first started. It was, and they had these thick Coke bottle nerd glasses that you might wear on Halloween. And I taped a little note on the bridge of those nerd glasses, and I said, please take a closer look at my business idea. And I put the glasses on top of the cigars that were on top of that envelope, and I sealed the box up, and I made 10 of them. And I sent them out to the top 10 morning radio shows here in Chicago. And about a week after those boxes went out, my phone rang. And I got a call from the producer of the Jonathan Brandmeier morning radio show. You guys know Johnny B? Well, back in 1994, man, his show was unbelievable. It was the #1 show here. It was like getting on Johnny Carson back in the day. And she called me up and she said, Brandmeier will have you on his show for 5 minutes. She said, make your 5 minutes count. And when you're an entrepreneur, 5 minutes can mean the difference between winning and losing, between seizing an opportunity and letting an opportunity pass you by. So I went to the John Hancock Tower that morning I was supposed to, and I meet Brandmeier, and we hit it off instantly. And my 5 minutes turned into 35 minutes at the heart of morning rush hour, right? And Brandmeier's saying things like he's been a member of the Cigar of the Month Club. I mean, he was going on and on how great it was. The guy was a brilliant marketer. But he kept giving out our 1-800 number every 15 or 20 seconds. And I left the John Hancock Tower, and I couldn't get a cab. There was a huge convention going on in the city. So I sprinted back to Division and Lakeshore, where our world headquarters was. It's probably a mile, I don't know. I'm all out of breath, and I kicked the door open, and there's my buddy John. He's got one phone on his left ear, one on his right ear. Every phone in that little apartment is ringing. And I leap over, and I pick up the first phone I can get my hands on, and I take an order from this woman, and she places a 12-month subscription to the Cigar of the Month Club. And I literally had to stop, and I had to ask this lady, are you sure? Like, it's $40 a month. That's a big commitment. She was sure. So I hung up the phone, I looked over at my pal John, I said, John, it looks like we're going to be in business for at least a year, because we've got a 12-month subscription we need to fulfill here. And then I got on WGN in the morning, and I got on all the radio shows here. And then I sent that same letter and those glasses to radio stations in New York, and Los Angeles, and Detroit, and Seattle. And sure enough, all these radio stations were having me on the air, and it wasn't costing me a penny. Now, when you have that entrepreneurial mindset, you're never satisfied, right? You try to take a good idea and make it better, make it more profitable. You challenge the status quo even when the status quo is working. And my phones were ringing, but I said to myself, how can I get these phones to ring even more? If it works with radio, what's the next logical step? Television, right? I thought, I'm from Chicago, Oprah's from Chicago, right? Like, it seemed like a no-brainer to me. So I modified the letter, and I went to that costume shop, and I bought every pair of those Coke bottle nerd glasses I could get my hands on. And I made 50 boxes, and I sent them out to every single daytime talk show on television. And a week went by, and my phone didn't ring. 2 weeks went by, I didn't get a call. It was Thursday of that third week, my phone rang, finally, from all those packages I sent out. But it was not the call that I'd hoped for. It was not Oprah. I got a call from the producers of the Danny Bonaduce daytime talk show. You guys remember Danny Bonaduce? Well, he had a nationally syndicated daytime talk show that was here in Chicago. It was on the air for maybe 10 or 12 weeks before it got canceled. But I got on that show twice in the 10 weeks it was on. And the producers called me up, and when you're starting out, and a lot of people here are going to start out, you have to leave your comfort zone. You've got to do things that you wouldn't probably ordinarily do in the name of success, as long as they're honorable and legal and things like that. Licensed, yes, thank you, Maria. Yes, yes, indeed. So these producers called me up, and the Bonaducci studios were up on the north side, right? And they said, come on in, we want to talk about putting your products on our unique gifts for the holiday show. So I went up there, and I sit down with these producers, and they immediately start negotiating a deal. They said, Bill, we'll put your products on our unique gifts for the holiday show, but we want you to do our eligible bachelor show in return. And this is where I had to sell my soul to the devil. I said, okay, but on one condition, I want to have my buddy Carson come on the show with me. I said, I want to have someone to share this wonderful experience with, right? And they agree, and I get out of there, and I call Carson, and he was on board. I'm like, sure. The eligible bachelor going to fix us up with these models from Paris, right? This is what they had told us. Like, how can I not do it? So the day comes, and the Bonaducci show sends a stretch limousine to pick us up. Now, I'd never been in a limousine until that day. And we're riding over to the studio, high-fiving each other, thinking, boy, we made it. Like, this is as good as it gets. And I'm at the TV studio, and I'm there about 20 minutes, and then it occurs to me why they had sent the limousine to pick us up. You see, they had conveniently changed the topic of the show, and they were afraid once we found out what the show was really titled, if our cars were there, we'd be more likely to leave. They conveniently changed the topic of the show to dateless and lonely for the holidays. Right? My buddy Carson's running for the door. I'm grabbing him by the back of his shirt collar. Carson, you have nothing to worry about, man. None of our friends watch daytime television. You got to help me out because I need to get my products on the unique gifts of the holiday show. So we go through what is probably still to this day one of the most humiliating experiences of our lives. But it gets better. They air that particular show Thanksgiving Day. Who here works on Thanksgiving Day? Right? It was the highest rated show in the 10-week run of the Danny Bonaducci show, right? But then we got on CNN, we got a Good Morning America, and within the first 30 days, we had that, the phone lines in that apartment. We had over 1,000 members getting these packages sent to their home each and every month. And then we picked up 4,000 the next Father's Day. And then the next holiday season, it was 8,000. And this thing kept growing and growing and growing. And don't worry, Mary, we quickly moved out of the apartment. We went to the West Loop, Fulton and Jefferson area, and we had a great landlord there who was willing to let us grow and let us grow as the business grew. But then as the years went on, it was the late 90s, and the world changed. The dot-com boom started to take off. People were changing the way they were buying gifts. They were falling out of love with this of-the-month club concept, and I said to myself, I said, wait a minute. The world is changing around me. As an entrepreneur, I need to change. I need to adapt, I need to react, I need to be agile, because if I don't, I will become extinct. And I slowly but surely shifted my business model, changing the way I reach my customers. I started selling to casinos and resorts and country clubs. That's how I met this guy, Lou, casino guy, right here. He used to work with me. But we adjusted our game plan. We stayed in the same business, but just changed the way we reached our customers. And I find that when entrepreneurs take the blinders off, when they leave their comfort zone, when they are able to adapt to what's happening around them, they become successful. And that's what Howard's doing here. He's helping entrepreneurs embrace change, embrace the new world, find new avenues to grow and reach customers. And I was lucky that I was agile because some of our competitors who were doing some of these of-the-month clubs, they wound up going out of business and filing for bankruptcy. So I sold that business in 01, and then I got asked to go on the show, The Apprentice. They were looking for young entrepreneurs to compete. And they had 215,000 people apply. And they narrowed it down, and they came up with the final 16. And we went through all these, crazy tasks. It was absolutely brutal, surviving on 2 to 3 hours of sleep a night. And in the end, it was down to me and one other fella. And I was able to come out victorious. I won the very first season of that. And then as soon as I won, my celebration was literally a couple minutes because I got whisked away and I had to go on a 2-week tour of all the talk shows. Larry King and Jay Leno and the Today Show and Ellen. Where were those people back in the early days when I was stuck doing Danny Bonaducci? I could have used them back then. But I finished that whole tour and I came back home to my house in Chicago, and it was a moment of reflection for me. And I started to ask myself, why me? What separated me from the pack of all these people who wanted to win? We had 215,000 people who applied. What did I do that was able to separate myself from the pack? And I think there were 3 reasons why I was able to win. And I think these are why entrepreneurs are successful. The first one is I grew up understanding and embracing a term called practical execution. Thanks to my dad. My dad was a superintendent of schools. He was just a real smart guy. And he always used to tell me, actions speak louder than words. Show me, don't tell me. And as an entrepreneur, that's probably the best trait you can bring. Show people, don't tell them. Because most people go through life and they talk a heck of a game. They're going to build this business, they're going to achieve this sales number, they're going to write this book, they're going to climb this mountain. But 99.9% of them don't do it. Actions speak louder than words. Show me, don't tell me. Secondly, I understood how important it was to be agile. And on The Apprentice, I was able to recognize that, and I was able to adapt and change as the weeks went on. Where a lot of people, they followed the textbook, and they didn't adjust based on the task or the challenge or what was facing them that particular week. And I was able to do that. And then lastly, it's about risk. It's about understanding risk. It's about respecting risk. It's about managing risk. But most importantly, it's about converting risk into success. And success is a funny word. And I always wonder, why are some entrepreneurs successful and statistically speaking, many not? The majority are not. And it's a hard question to answer, but for me, it comes down to one word, and that word is fear. I don't know if you knew this, but when we're born into this world, we're only born with two natural fears: the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. And every other fear we have is learned. And so many people are afraid they're going to fail. They're afraid they're going to make a mistake. They're afraid what their friends or their colleagues are going to say, that they never even try. And in my opinion, that's the biggest failure of them all. I think it was Emerson who once said, always, always, always do what you're afraid to do, and success will find you. I know about fear, because when I first had to work on this high-rise, I was scared. I thought, oh my God, how am I going to survive? I've never worked on a high-rise. This is such a big project. But I was sent to a town called White Plains, New York, to shadow a guy who was the chairman of a major construction company. And he taught me an incredibly valuable lesson about being an entrepreneur. And he did it in his own style. He was this big, burly guy from Brooklyn. And as I was leaving the office one day, he turned to me with his thick Brooklyn accent, and he said, "Hey, kid," he said, "be the conductor." And I said, "Okay." Now I was afraid of him. I just met him. So I said, "Okay, have a good night." I didn't know what he meant by that. But as I was riding back into Manhattan, I started thinking about it. Be the conductor. Was he referring to the conductor of a locomotive? What was this guy getting at? And then it hit me. He was referring to the conductor of an orchestra. You see, the conductor of an orchestra has all these expert musicians in his or her pit, and they play their instruments to absolute perfection. The conductor himself or herself is not an expert at playing each and every one of those instruments, but he gets them all to play in harmony with one another. The moral of the story is, if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to be a conductor. You have to realize that you're not the smartest guy in the room or the smartest lady in the room, but you got to make sure that you find those people and you make beautiful music. Because when that conductor tries to play every instrument, it's pretty horrible, right? It doesn't sound so good. But when he says, "Wait a minute, maybe Howard can find me someone who can help me with social media. Maybe I can market this and these different channels. Maybe there's a way I can break through and take this small business internationally into Dubai or Mexico City or wherever we have these relationships." That's how you conduct. You take advantage of the resources that you're given. And here at 1871, it's incredible. To think that this place exists, I wish it was around in 1994, because it would have been absolutely amazing. Embrace it, conduct, check your ego at the door. Now, I think as an entrepreneur, I want to end with this. One of probably the best gifts we could have is our own potential. And I really believe that when we're born into this world, we're given a certain amount of currency in the form of potential. And it's up to us to make it grow, and it's up to us to make it multiply. Yet so many of us don't do anything with it. We bury it in the ground, right? We hang on too tight, and we don't let it grow. And as an entrepreneur, we have to embrace that. And someone who I thought really did a great job of that is someone who's a friend of mine and a really good friend of my wife, Joan Rivers. You guys, everyone know who Joan Rivers is, right? She was just an incredible lady. It's a happy story, don't worry. But she passed away about a year ago. And my wife and I were at her funeral, and after her funeral, about 50 of us were invited back to her apartment for a little reception. And we were back at her apartment, and I noticed that About 70% of the people there were wearing these little stick pins, like these, what do they call those? Like jewelry, like stick pin, is that right? And they were of a bumblebee. And I turned to Giuliana and said, what's with all the bumblebees? She goes, I don't know. She said, Joan always considered herself the bumblebee. And we left, and I went back to our hotel room, and I was just, it was weighing on me. So I Googled bumblebee, right, of course. And when you Google bumblebee, the first thing that comes up is the bumblebee, by all reasonable laws of physics, was never meant to fly. Its wing-to-weight ratio should prohibit it from ever getting liftoff from the ground. But no one ever told the bee that, and the bee flies. You see, Joan Rivers was the bumblebee because she didn't let people put limitations on her. Everyone said, you can't host a late-night talk show, you're a woman. She didn't listen, and she did it. You can't sell $100 million worth of jewelry on the Home Shopping Network. She did it. You see, as entrepreneurs, we have to be the bee. We cannot let people tell us whether we can or cannot fly. That is up to us. And if we're agile, we adopt that never quit, never make excuse mindset, and we find creative ways to be heard, to brand ourselves, to brand our product, we will find success. And in life as an entrepreneur, there's going to be highs and there's going to be lows. I can guarantee you that. But I always end with this. In life, tough times don't last, but tough people do. I want to thank you folks for having me here today. Thank you, Howard and Thank you.